to Sebastian's ideas.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to all of you. I would like to thank you for inviting me, and in particular to Sebastian for his presentation. I would like to say I prepared my response, in fact, on what is contained in the two booklets that the WWF has presented, and which I found really very interesting reading. But before I come to my main points that I think we should go a bit deeper, let me say one thing. We have recently made an effort to communicate to the public through a communication some adjustment on how the cohesion policy should intervene in the area of sustainable growth. And also the NGOs have contributed to that. And in this communication, in fact, we suggest that we do also still in this program period some adjustments in those areas where we still have room for maneuver. That means where effective spending is not yet committed to concrete projects. And what we suggest in particular there is that we should invest more in certain areas like the green economy, in particular when it comes to low carbon economy. And secondly, to invest better. And when we speak about better, we believe that there has something to be improved in the delivery mechanism, and in particular also in investment, how these investment decisions are made. So what we like to really promote still in this period and put it at another scale is, for example, investments in the field of energy efficiency in buildings, things that were only made available as a new form of eligibility rather recently at last year's revision of our ERDF regulation. Then for renewable energy, and also for a better use of sustainable modes of transport, in particular in the context of clean urban transport, where we believe there could be still more brought forward in this period. And we have very good examples from a number of member states what effectively you can do in these areas. Let me just quote a few of them. Energy efficiency in buildings. We have a fantastic success record, really, that we see in France, where it was possible within 18 months to use the 4% of the potential spending for the climate proofing of houses with a social focus. This was possible to do in 1.5 years. And I think it stands out as a model that should be simply replicated, I think, also in other countries. And we would like to do from our side all the possible in order to support that. Other initiatives, like for example in Austria, are in the use of renewable energy. In the UK, marine energy, where we have got considerable investments brought forward. Or for example, in Spain, there was a very successful rollout of the high-speed trains, also with a relatively good speed. I think we can learn a lot when it comes now to the big projects up in the new member states from the Spanish example, and we would like very much to be behind that some lessons can be transferred over there in these new member states in the area of training. More specifically on the budget, as you know, compared with the previous period to 2007-2013, there was a considerable increase in the overall budget for investments in the environment area. 105 billion is now the largest spending area for structural funds in the environment, and out of that 48 billion will be invested in climate mitigation measures, and about 33 billion are devoted to sustainable mode of transport like railways, multimodal transport, cycle track and clean urban transport. It's very important to remind that there is a treaty obligation for the cohesion fund to invest in the trans-European networks. I'm saying this because this is one of the perhaps more controversial issues in in the discussion, also when I read the budget that Sebastian has presented here as an alternative for the trans-European, for investments in transport area. And as you know, the Commission is currently working on reviewing the TEN-T guidelines in view of notably an alignment with the 2050 decarbonization goal of the EU. And in future, cohesion policy will also support investment in newly defined transport corridors, which will have to take into account, amongst other factors, certainly the necessary climate change targets. And the need to support transport infrastructure in richer regions will also be reviewed. Hence, the priority investments will to a greater degree reflect decarbonization. However, member states and regions are also competent at the time to decide whether to fund investment in roads or not. And the European Commission margin is to some extent limited once the priority projects have been identified by the national levels. More specifically on transport, I would like to highlight that investment in transport infrastructure will be also necessary in the next programming period, including investments in roads. As in some member states, there is a low endowment of infrastructure that hinders economic development and has other negative results, particularly on security, which might result in a higher number of road fatal accidents. In the development of transport infrastructure, I would like to reiterate that all co-funded projects need to fully comply with EU legislation, like environmental impact assessment, strategic environmental assessment directives, but also with the bird and habitat directives. And these procedures are obligatory for all strategies, programs and projects, which are expected to have a significant environmental impact. The EIA directive is under review in order to increase its environmental effectiveness, and this should contribute to biodiversity and climate proofing of the policy. Building sustainability is also about governance. All local, regional actors, including the civil society and NGOs, need to be taken into account in cross-sectoral structures. The EU 2020 strategy focuses on sustainable growth in resource efficiency flagship. The future cohesion policy will be aligned with the Europe 2020 strategy and will ensure that it will focus on sustainable growth. Cohesion policy, as you all know, is implemented as a shared competence with member states, and among the funding allocated to certain categories of expenditure is very much in the hands to the national authorities. However, we from the Commission do have tools to influence decisions by the member states. In the next programming period, the Commission will focus on fewer priorities, and we would also like to use a thematic concentration to translate the Europe 2020 strategies and its flagships into concrete investment decisions. Several thematic priorities will be related to climate change and resource efficiency. For example, we are exploring currently how we could abolish the current spending ceilings on funds available for energy efficiency in housing. You all know we have the 4%, and we all know that that might be a difficult discussion in the next round, knowing the difficulties that we had in the Council when we negotiated the last round of the revision of our regulation. But we believe by using arguments as, for example, successful measures like we had it in France, and we will get most likely in a few other countries over the last months, that we can prove that we are striking several benefits with one stroke. Not only, so to say, in terms of gaining in energy saving and making our CO2 emissions going down, we have also a very successful record of jobs created, jobs in the local context where we want to have the jobs. We have a social transfer ensured to those households who benefited from that investment. So we would like to develop an argument here along these lines, which would help us perhaps to extend that type of actions, as you suggested also as one of your priorities as you see it. The environmental effectiveness of the policy will also be improved through the use of what we call now conditionalities. Such conditionalities could be determined in several areas, including in the area of environmental protection, and the Commission is currently working on identifying, that means giving some concrete meaning to these conditionalities. And we recognize the lack of the capacity in member states and regions that can be an obstacle to implementing more complex projects. We see that somehow as a matter of fact. And for that purpose also, the idea to increase the funding for technical assistance that will be available to member states to increase their administrative capacity seems a very good idea. We are considering, for example, to continue with the JASPERS facility in the future, and ideas as you have formulated it, for example, to use JASPERS also for tasks like, for example, working with member states in the context of climate change actions at the level of city literacy seems for us a very realistic proposal that we might consider supporting. In addition, the achievement of institutional reforms could become a precondition for disbursement of funds in the next programming period, which should also contribute to the building of capacities which relate to environment in public administrations. And of course, we need also to reinforce our partnership. This was mentioned already in the 5th cohesion report. And we believe that the dialogue with the public and private entities which are relevant, as well as with organizations as we have them gathered here, is an important thing. We also believe that we have perhaps a more easy tool available through simplified administrative tools like simplified costs that would allow us to strengthen the partnership with the civil society, and by hiring, for example, also NGOs to some extent in order to promote the development of projects and the spreading of awareness and good practice in the context of projects that we see then coming up for finance. So these are ideas that we definitely following up for the next period.